welcome to Going Beyond Story. I'm your host, Dr. Theon, and we are here to share stories of failing forward and succeeding greatly. Our stories actually help us to learn more, and they're impactful in the whole world. So thanks for joining the Going Beyond Story show. Tonight, or today, it's actually evening. Tonight, we are going to talk a little bit about some storytelling tips that capture attention. And I'm going to tell you 3 tips to storytelling that can capture attention in terms of you sharing your best stories. Now, when you share your stories, it's always a way to tell people what it is that you're trying to get across. Also, in sharing your stories, you want to make sure that your stories are impactful enough so that people can learn from them. Because that's what we do with stories. We share them so that we can learn. So I'm going to give you a couple of pointers on how to tell a story that'll capture attention. These are just 3 tools that I've used in the past. There's lots of tools you can use for storytelling. The first tool we're going to talk about is starting with the end in mind. It's one of my favorite tools because it actually takes you to the end of a story. Have you ever actually went to the last chapter of a story to find out the ending before it was over when you started reading a book? I do that sometimes, but I really like to go through every chapter before I go to the end. But sometimes I'm just like, I want to know if they live through the whole story. I need to know. Well, just like wanting to know the ending is really important to some people, starting with the end in mind is important to the writing process. So when you're writing, you want to know what is it that you want your reader to feel by the end of your story. Do you want them to be happy? Do you want them to be sad? Do you want them to still be curious about what's going on in the story? Start with the end in mind, and then you'll figure out how you craft your story to get to that perfect ending. What emotion are you trying to evoke with your story? And when you get to that story, what action should your reader or your listener take? So start with the end in mind. That helps to set the tone and the pace of the story that you're telling. So, tool number 2. What tool do I want to give you for number 2? I have lots of tools, so I'm kind of going with these off the top of my head. Let's give you the "This Can't Wait" story. The "This Can't Wait" story is the story that's on a time clock. It's rattling and running to get to the end. The "This Can't Wait" story is the story that gives you the tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. You've all seen the commercials and heard the short stories that beckon you to take immediate action. You have to do it right now. Well, what these type of stories have in common is they're usually told at a quick pace, and there's a time clock attached to them. So when a time clock is attached to a story, it means you really want to keep a certain pace going, that for example, your protagonist may have to, or your hero in the story may have to get to something before the protagonist can stop them from getting there. That's the "This Can't Wait" story. And whether it's a high-speed chase with a good guy that's anxious to catch the villain and stop the crime, or the pitchman that visits your local grocer with a limited time offer for a veggie slicer or something like that, there's always some sense of urgency attached to these stories. So these stories are shared at a faster pace. They're almost like speed talking. When you read them, you almost feel like you're speed reading. And they're also told with excitement and enthusiasm. So make sure that when you're telling these stories, the pitch and the tone of the story goes with you along the way. So you have some highs and lows, and it moves at different times, and you kind of travel through the story like you just can't wait to get there. You're really trying to get your timing down and things like that. mostly there's a high in these stories, and there's a high intensity of speed and tone and pitch because the storyteller wants you to respond in the same way. It wants you, the storyteller wants you to feel like you're a part of that story that's traveling. So that's the this can't wait or the time clock story. That's another way of telling a story that gets attention. So the third storytelling tool that I'd like to share with you is I'm actually going to give you four because I have two that I want to talk about now. So the third one is the I'm okay, you're okay story. And this is a medium tone story. And it invites the listener to sit with the story and sort through their emotions. And these stories are usually self-improvement stories or reflection stories. And they're shared in an authentic voice of the presenter. So they tend to be biographies or autobiographies, sharing a message of the presenter. And they actually want you to have emotion. They want you to emote something from them. They want you to reflect. These stories are best known as give and take because the storyteller is trying to move you in a purposeful way to learn about their story, but also they want you to share your emotions back. So those are give and take stories. They are medium paced story, and they're kind of like a not a tell-all because that would fall in a different category, but kind of a sharing story. So it would be if I shared something with you and then you shared that back with me. Actually, how I'm sharing this information right now is an I'm okay, you're okay story because it's a give and take. I'm giving you something, and hopefully you'll give me some feedback on what you learned from the message that you're receiving. So that is the I'm okay, you're okay story. The last story last story tool that I'm going to share with you is one that we see often. And again, it involves emotions. And this one I'm going to call the feel for me tool. These stories compel you to feel something. They want you to either laugh with the writer or cry with the writer or reflect with the writer. Just do something with me. Feel for me, feel. Let me get the feelings that you're having when you read my work. I want you to feel. So when you invite a reader to emote, the story moves in the way of the emotion that you want to emote or emit. For sad stories, there's usually a slow and sullen pace. For stories of laughter, there's usually some kind of systemic timing that features or is designed to get you laughing on certain beats. They have a certain rhythm to them. And then there's the tearjerkers that use certain words or certain pivot points to lead you to some place of empathy or sympathy and get you to endure the characters. These stories can have a shared experience by the presenter, or they could be intended to drive a point home that the presenter puts out there for others, but not for themselves. So those are the four types of stories or storytelling tools that I wanted to share with you on the podcast today. And let's just go back over them. We have all of these are storytelling tips that allow you to capture attention. And the first tip is the this can't wait story. And I'm sorry, that wasn't the first one. Go back. The first one was the start with the end in mind story. And this is where you start at the end, think about what you want your reader to get from the story, and then you write based on what you want your ending to be, or what you want your reader's action and feeling to be at the end. The second tool that I gave you was the this can't wait story. And that's the stories that are on a time clock. There's usually a race against time. There's usually a character that's trying to get to something. It's a classic hero's journey story. The third tool that I gave you is the I'm okay, you're okay story. And in the I'm okay, you're okay story, this is a sharing of information where it's a give and take. You're giving something, the reader is receiving something. Hopefully the reader can share something back as they continue to read and go through with your story. And finally, it's the feel for me story. And that's a story where you are trying to evoke emotions from your reader. So using these story tool tips, you can create stories that readers will pay attention to, and you can create stories that determine your success or your failing forward moments for a lifetime. Thank you for joining me today on the Going Beyond Story Show. Visit us at www.beyondstory.com. And be sure to check us out on iTunes, the Going Beyond Story Show. That's Going Beyond Story Podcast. And you also can see us on YouTube with Beyond Story. Hope you enjoyed the stories. And remember, everyone has a story, and your stories are impactful. They help you to fail forward and succeed greatly. We look forward to hearing from you, seeing you, and having you on our next Going Beyond Story episode. Thanks a lot for joining us. Bye-bye. This is Dr. Theon signing off.